This is Impact Healthcare, people and strategies that are disrupting the health benefits industry. And now, here's your host, healthcare benefits industry expert and the originator of the transparent health benefits movement, Lester Morales.
Welcome back to another episode of Impact Healthcare. And it's funny, if you took a map and you tried to point out two places that are still considered in the United States, Puerto Rico and Tacoma might be completely opposite ends of the world. But the reason I love this business so much is that you meet friends, you meet colleagues that turn into your friends. I've got somebody I consider one of my friends on, Chris Wolpert. Chris, for my audience out there that maybe has never heard of Tacoma, Chris Wolpert, GBS, or any of this, give me an introduction about you, your great company, and guys like us that wake up, and let's call it, we're salmon, right? We're swimming upstream. We're barking off a tree that nobody else has some sort of story, some sort of motivation, some extra oomph. What's your oomph you get up with every morning?
Yeah, well, I love the salmon reference. That my friends up here in the Pacific Northwest. That was perfect. That was not even scripted, but well done, Lester. I appreciate it. So for the audience members that don't know, I'm Chris Wolpert from Tacoma, Washington. Fun fact about Tacoma is home to Stadium High School, and if you ever watched 10 Things I Hate About You that came out 20 some odd years ago. That was the high school that I went to and graduated from, and they filmed that movie literally the day after my freshman year of high school ended is when they started filming that film with Heath Ledger and Julia Stiles and Joseph Gordon-Levitt and a number of others. But anyhow, so there's your fun fact about Tacoma. And GBS, I started back in 2016. Our mission is to modernize healthcare by eliminating employees' out-of-pocket expenses, while simultaneously guiding them to the highest quality healthcare.
So, Chris, you started GBS, so it wasn't your first job in the insurance industry. Something happened that gave you that, I don't know, the wake-up moment, the aha, the oomph, whatever you want to call it. What was that for you?
Yeah, well, it was kind of just to take, I guess, another kind of Seattle thing. It was kind of a slow percolation. It was a slow drip where I arrived in the health insurance space and specializing in that as Lester holds up his Starbucks cup. Perfect. We're just full of Seattle references today. I should have worn a flannel. Then it would have been just like absolutely spot on. Anyways, so what ended up happening was I was working as a financial advisor, and I'd gotten into the insurance industry right out of college, and I found myself kind of drifting more into the sales side of things. And then what happened in 2010 is when the ACA was passed, and then I had a lot of my clients at the time. I was working primarily in the business sector and setting up SEPs and Simples and 401k plans and doing key man life policies and disability and all those kinds of things. And a lot of my clients at the time were saying, yeah, well, we need help with all these things, but we're really concerned about what the ACA means. And we've got, a benefits broker who's getting out of the industry or hanging it up or all these kinds of things. And so I kind of saw that as my pivot. And so I'd known somebody through an industry association I'd been referring business to. And kind of funny side note to this story, I had referred this guy. It turned out to be about 150 life group at one point, not realizing what the revenue was on a group like that. And he literally went and closed it like the next day and then took me to lunch and gave me a check for $1,000 as like a finder's fee. And I thought, well, crap, what am I doing? Like I keep sending this guy work and yet I've got clients asking about this. And that's how this kind of ended up in his, in his book of business for a time. And so later on, I had approached him and said, hey, I'm kind of thinking I'm not completely happy with what I'm doing, but I kind of want to do what you're doing. And he had planted that seed with me and said, look, I want to exit eventually, and I'd like to find somebody to work for me. Otherwise, I'm going to have to sell my book to one of these large brokerage houses. And he wasn't really completely enamored with that. So anyway, so long story short, I ended up going to work for him and spent a couple of years there and was his exit strategy. And as these things go at times, right, we get to the end there, and I think it was really kind of my decision in the end, but it was one of these things where it ended up just kind of falling through, and decided not to continue to pursue that. But all along, there were kind of little things that happened along the way. This was 2014, 2015, early 2016 was when I was working for him. And if you remember, Lester, that's when benefit admin systems, where they were a dime a dozen. They were all kind of trying to compete for that market space. I had evaluated several of those and was thinking, okay, when we do this transition, this is I want this technology. I want to, be able to leverage this. And he was very resistant to that, making the investment, which again, I get if he's on his way out, but there was also, that was kind of one of the first things that was kind of a red flag. And then later I was starting to meet people across the country, as we have on LinkedIn initially at first, meeting Eric Silverman and Nelson Griswold and some of the people in that atmosphere, that in that ecosystem, and was learning that there were ways to control healthcare costs. And largely this was an agency that had about 150 clients, and there were 3 that were self-funded, no level funded, and the rest were all fully insured with 2 to 3 different carriers, and then a few association plans. And so there was really kind of no solutions that were out there. And I got tired of going in each and every renewal, being kind of the young partner, the young gun, supposed to have all these new ideas, and basically being told, no, you just need to maintain good relationships with, the big carriers and keep them happy and stuff. And so that was one of the things. And also having watched people in my family, my mom most specifically, have worked in hospital administration their entire careers, and hearing them complain about what it's like for patients on that side of it, and then also seeing what we were doing on the insurance side, and really seeing how the decisions that we were making, myself and my partner at the time, and the upper level, the upper crust of those employers, were making these decisions that affected, dozens and dozens and hundreds and probably, thousands of people, and yet, not really doing anything to solve that problem. And so that was really kind of it for me, is kind of seeing this from a bunch of different dimensions and a bunch of different perspectives on how broken this system was that we were in, and also feeling like, shoot, this is something I've kind of like, I'm going to do the rest of my career. At that point, it was going to be, another, 30 years, maybe something like that, when I'm in my early 30s. And I wasn't super enthused about what I was doing. It didn't feel like I was solving a problem. It didn't feel like I was bringing any solutions. And so that's what really kind of led me down this path to opening up my own agency, having a mission, a mission-driven organization that we do now, and really having that be the kind of being the litmus test, I guess, for, do we put this solution in place or not? Do we right? Because you can, I think, get so busy with all the little things that you kind of drift off of your core mission of, in our case, modernizing healthcare. And so that always is really kind of our true north, and keeps us centered and grounded and focused really ultimately on what is most important and what we need to be doing.
So, I if I'm going to call this episode something of where I wanted to have the conversation, I would call it all in. And I think that's something you and I share. It's an athletic term, right? Of like you leave it out all in the field. So, as I've known about you, right? You have been a best-selling author. You publish a lot of things on LinkedIn. You do your dad jokes on Sundays, your fables, you're speaking on stages. You've got your own comic book and comic character around this industry. Now we are 2 people that are in a documentary that's going to be released, and a big congratulations that you just got nominated, the Benefits Pro Broker of the Year nominee. So like, you took the chips that you started to gather around, and you shoved them in the middle of the table. You says, I'm all in some people would ask why. Some people would say, hey, you know what? That's slow and steady. I read that book with the tortoise and the hare. I should probably keep a couple of chips over here. You took all your chips and you put it in the middle. What was the rationale? Or maybe there wasn't a rationale, but when you look backwards now, how do you feel about that?
Well, it's what I just talked about. Really, it was having that kind of that internal sense of I don't know, pride or determination or what, but that's really what it was. I was going through the opportunity to take over a business that was generating and had been over 7 figures for a number of years. And so then to walk away from all that and say, no, I'm going to do this from scratch. It was, until you framed it that way, I've never thought about it that way, Lester, but that is what I did. As I pushed the chips in the middle and I just said, hey, look, I'm betting on myself here. I'm going to go all in that this way of doing things, this modernization, this building sustainable health plans, this whatever, next gen Rosetta, whatever you want to call it, this different way of doing things is not only, I think, what the wave of the future is in this industry, but that's really where my heart is, right? Because, at the end of the day, if we're not solving problems for our clients, what are we ultimately doing? And the thing is like when we can put the employee, the end user, back at the center of the conversation rather than just what I want or what Mr. CFO or Mr. CEO or Mrs. What they want as well, then that's really ultimately who our end user is, our end customer is these employees who have to actually use this plan. And the amount of just how opaque and non-transparent and confusing and fragmented this process is for them. If we can put them back at the center of this, that's ultimately what I wanted to be able to do. And where the other piece of where I think I'd like to go with this is that, the reason for writing the book and the comic book and doing maybe not so much the fables or the dad jokes. Those are kind of fun, non-healthcare related things that I can do online just to kind of draw people in and also show a little bit of my own kind of personality in an otherwise very dull subject, which again is also part of why I did the comic book. But I do those things and the documentary as well. All of these things, the end goal really is ultimately to educate the market, because it's like, look, there's so many people that, everybody, you call them up, they're happy with their broker. They like their broker. They've got, they go to play golf with them. They go to dinners or concerts or whatever. We've got very charismatic people in this industry. There's no shortage of personality. What there is a shortage of, though, is our solutions. And I think on the other side of it is, and what I did in the very early days was I was going out there and trying to convince each and every single person that I met that this was the way to do it, and realizing that I was beating my head against a brick wall. That wasn't going to work. So I then took the approach where, again, the book, the comic book, the documentary, all this stuff, even the content that we're putting out on LinkedIn, it's really simply more to educate and engage. But it really is to educate and draw those folks in that have put their hands up and say, you know what, I've had enough. I've been doing this. I've been beating my head against a wall, a brick wall, as an HR director, as a CFO, as a business owner, and we're not getting any results. It's getting worse. It's eating into the rest of our compensation budget. It's eating into other areas. It's already number 2 or number 3 on our P&L. We've got to do something different here. And to find those small minority of people is ultimately what we're after. Because at the end of the day, it's, I can't compete with the large brokerages on their level, right? I can't play their game. I've got to play a different game as an independent broker. And that's the way for us to do that. And the other thing too is if we can have an outsized impact, it only takes a small amount of clients. I'm really ultimately looking for maybe 5 to 10 clients a year. I'm not trying to set the world on fire with the amount of groups that we're trying to bring on, but we're trying to have an outsized impact with those groups, because the reality of it is, we haven't lost a client in 5 years, other than the handful of ones that we've had to fire because we realize when we get them in the door, oh, wait, you're not who you said you were. You're not willing to do this. You're really just not a fit for us. So we need to part ways. And so if we can really focus on that education and draw them in and get them to, I don't know, drink the Kool-Aid, I guess, or get them to push their chips all in, because it is a big change. It is a big departure from what they've done in the past, to want to build a health plan this way, then we want to work with somebody who is wanting to do that inside their own organization as well.
So, Chris, for some people that are listening to this and says, okay, the guy himself is charismatic. He seems somewhat interesting. He's a man of multiple, traits and hats. He's funny. He tells dad jokes. He writes books. I want to go, and I remember this. I think you posted on LinkedIn, and you related your comic book, obviously, to when we think about Donald Miller's story brand and the hero's journey, right?
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna let's pick a character. Let's go with your comic book. Because here's what I want. There's going to be so many people that are listening to this that heard what you said about the health plan and modernizing it and says, okay, but what the hell does he actually mean in this? And so I'd love to relate your two worlds and say, let's build a comic book. What would you call it? A story right here on this podcast, and says, pick an example client that you've worked with. And, you're the guide, right? They're the hero. And let's talk about where was their issue? What did you help them overcome? What was that? Let's go through this story so that we can teach the audience, but in the same way you would in your comic book. So, I normally, I love Star Wars, and so Yoda's my boy. So I would say, hey, we're Yoda, right? We're, follow me, you will, right? And do that. So, pick a character, think of a client in your head, and let's think what does that client want to get accomplished? So when you talk to employers, your comic book character now, when you talk to the employers, what are they struggling with? Where's their issue? And let's personify this. We're gonna have fun on this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I love it. And yeah, for those of you that have not, I'll give a shout out to Donald Miller, I guess, here, but Story Brand is really kind of, that book came out in 2016, and right around the time I was starting my agency and trying to figure out how to market and all this kind of stuff. And I've talked about this on other interviews and stuff, so I won't go into a whole lot of detail about it. But basically, I'd got the idea to write, rather than writing a boring insurance book, which I'd already done with no, I won't say that. That's a good book too. But anyways, I had already written the insurance book. I wanted to do something different, but I really wanted to draw in those folks that want to take that journey. The important thing about Story Brand, and one of the biggest points, is that there's a lot of marketing around, kind of making us as the solution provider the hero, but nobody wants to go on that journey where you're the hero. That's your hero's journey. Right. Nobody said they want to go on a story where they identify with the hero. That's why those stories, Star Wars, for example, you just brought up, is so powerful, is because everybody can kind of see Luke Skywalker in themselves in a way, right? But yet what they're looking for, or maybe what they're not looking for, because in many cases, the hero that goes on the journey, in most cases, actually, it's a reluctant hero. They don't want to, they are happy and comfortable and feel satisfied exactly where they are, but some kind of outside force propels them on to taking that journey. In Luke's case, it was, the fact when he comes home and his aunt and uncle have been killed, and his, the farm and everything is destroyed. And at that point he has to go off on his journey. And that's where I start the story in the comic book is, first of all, there's two heroes in my story. One of them's the CFO, and the other one is the HR director of this castle, or of this kingdom. And it's kind of set in this kind of Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings fantasy world. And so the CFO is kind of more of the reluctant hero, and the HR director is more of the kind of the catalyst hero, if you will. There are those in some stories too, where the catalyst hero is kind of pulling the rest of the characters along on their journey. And so I wanted to have that of having because the other issue that we have in our industry, when we're, educating and selling to these folks, is you have to build consensus. And so how do you do that when somebody's pushing and the other one's pulling the other direction, right? So I wanted to kind of illustrate that building consensus is sometimes the most important part of what we do. And so a real life example is we had COVID 2020 happens, right? There was a guy that I'd been dripping on for a while, owns a transportation, a trucking firm, basically in the Tacoma area here, and his wife is their HR director. So we'll come back to that, but just keep in mind that the owner and the owner's wife are both part of this decision. So not to throw another monkey wrench into trying to build consensus, but having to do that when you've got a husband and wife makes it even more challenging. So anyways, COVID happens, and what they had been doing up until that point was just not working for them. They had at the time a bronze level $6,000 deductible plan. They were doing paper enrollments on a spreadsheet for open enrollment, and they had 3 locations, mind you. So open enrollment was very daunting for them, and they were doing it very analog, very old school. They were fully insured. They had an extremely high rate for a really just not very good plan. And finally, I was, after dripping on him for a while, I got his attention to where he said, look, we need to talk to you. Like, there's something in all of this that we need to learn from you about what you're doing and if this could work for us. Right. So, in that case, again, just to put a pause in the hero's journey here, right? They were reluctant heroes, I think, in this case, right? They decide to kind of go out into this new world and try to figure out what exactly is happening. And then one of the first things that happens in the hero's journey, in that story arc, is you find a mentor. And that, I think, was what they were looking for. Whether it's hard to say. I don't view myself as being his mentor, but in this case, that's what he was looking for, and that's what I became. So then, we meet. We had some conversations where they learned quite a bit about what we're doing, how it's maybe different than what they're doing, where the similarities are, where that overlap is. So they get a little bit more comfortable with the idea. Then the next part of that story arc is there's tests, there's allies, and there's enemies. So at that point in the story arc, they're encountering other characters, they're encountering these different situations, they're in this new world, right? And they're trying to figure that out. And meanwhile, the guide is trying to help them through how navigating all of this, right? So when they've kind of done that, they feel like they're kind of settling in, they understand where they're at. That's when you then come to the crossing the threshold, right? So the crossing the threshold is when now that they've kind of pushed their chips all in at this point. They've gotten educated enough. They understand kind of conceptually where they're going. They don't necessarily understand it well enough to then relay that to the rest of their employees. But the point is at that point, we've introduced them to other people along the way. In my case, my partner, Eric Silverman, who handles our open enrollments, non-medical benefits. I've introduced him at that point. I've introduced a couple of other partners on TPAs, stop loss, those types of PBMs, kind of introduced them to those concepts and some of those people that are going to help them navigate this. And so now they're more comfortable with that idea to push their chips in and say, okay, this is for us. This isn't completely daunting. We can see ourselves doing this. But then crossing that first threshold is really, in this case, in my estimation, would be you're going through underwriting now, right? You've said, yes, we want to do this. Now we need to make sure that the people that are on the other side of it are going to look at you and say, okay, this is a risk that we're willing to take on. And so that was kind of an initial hurdle as well. They hadn't done that before. They've been fully insured for, this this company's entire lifetime up to that point. And so that was a big test, right? Because then we need to get medical questionnaires at that time. We had to get medical questionnaires from everybody. We had to figure out, again, what are some of the underlying conditions here? What are some things that we can overcome? Are there things that are going to kind of knock this group out, or what's going to happen? So that's a big test, that initial kind of crossing that threshold. And then after that, you kind of cross that and you're thinking, okay, now we're, at least from the hero's point of view, okay, now we're kind of getting to this good point now where we're going to be able to move forward. And then the biggest test, I think, in the hero's journey really is the ordeal. And that's where the ordeal really is that test that the mentor can help them as much as they possibly can, right? To show them, to educate them, to guide them, to bring them to this point. But when the hero gets to the ordeal part of the story, that's where they're tested. And they can't rely on the mentor at that point. They can't rely on all these other allies they've met along the way. They have to be the one to confront, they have to escape the belly of the whale, whatever it is, whatever that looks like for them. And in this case, it's making that jump to say, okay, we've gone through underwriting. We've got something we think is favorable here. Again, this is going to be a lot different. How are the employees going to react? Some of them weren't excited about going through underwriting, but so there's that test there that they have to get through on their own to say, okay, we've gotten to this point. We've been comfortable with it to this point. We need to now be the leader. We need to take this opportunity by the toe or whatever and move forward. And so they did. They ended up doing that, of course. And then what is the next point? I think the next point is the ordeal, and then it's meeting the goddess, which is also sometimes the where the what happens to the hero is they die, and I say that in quotations because sometimes they die figuratively, but really what happens is the old version of themselves dies. That old version of themselves that thought they could never do anything different, then continue to renew with the same career year after year, dies, and then they've got a new plan moving forward, and it reinvigorates or it brings them life again. And then the next step is the journey home. And so a lot of times, a lot of movies or stories that you see, that journey back home is sometimes also daunting because you've got kind of the villain or the shadow figure that's chasing the hero that realizes that now that they've lost, they need to try and do what they can to try and ensure that they don't let them get away. And so in this case, it was like I had a competitor of mine, just basically throwing a bunch of shade on us and saying, hey, don't you realize this guy has a tiny agency that he's been in business for, 4 years at that point. He doesn't know what he's doing. And I saw the emails. So, you know who you are. And I've got receipts, buddy. Anyways, but, there's that. They were chasing after them, trying to get them to stay where they were, could not, just continue that status quo. And yet this employer still was able to escape the clutches of the villain in this case, or the shadow figure that was trying to keep them in the same place. And then, of course, you've got the hero who returns with the elixir, is what it's called in Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces. And in that case, they brought home the prize, right? And in this case, what it ended up being was rates that were 15% lower than what they had the previous year. It was a zero deductible option with medical management in place to help guide and direct employees. And the other thing we were able to do is, again, I mentioned at the beginning of this, it was all analog, right? So we were able to, the payroll provider that they had, we were able to integrate our benefit admin system with. So now they had a seamless integration between the benefit admin system and their payroll, which was something they didn't have before. And again, this was 2020, so we weren't going to be doing in-person meetings by any means, not that we were even before that. But now we had a 360 integration where anytime they put somebody in payroll, we would get notified of a new hire, so on and so forth. but we were able to take that lift off of the admin team, off of the HR director, because of the solutions that we brought outside of just the insurance products themselves. And we were able to deliver it in a way that reduced their admin burden compared to what they'd had before. So reduce their admin burden, we saved them money, and we put them with a better plan. And again, they were the heroes. And so it was really after that experience, the first thing that we did was really edify them to say, look, you guys did an amazing job here. As much as they were very thankful for what we had done, it wasn't anything we've done differently for anybody else that we work with. It was just simply showing them that, hey, from where you guys were 6 or 9 months ago, whatever it was, to where they ended up just after the open enrollment and in first quarter of 2021 was really a night and day difference. It was really, quite the journey that we took them on and were able to deliver. I wanted to come back to one other thing, Lester, before we move on. One of the best we've had really a couple of very good case studies that came out of this group. One of the best ones I do want to share here briefly was the HR director, who again I mentioned is the owner's wife, right? So a few years ago, she reaches out to me. We were connecting about something else, and she mentions to me, she says, "Hey, I don't want to alarm you, but I just want to let you know I've been diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer." And so I'm like, "Oh, wow. Okay. Well, first of all, I'm glad that you caught it in stage 1, that it's still very, very treatable at this point." And she said, "But look, here's the thing is my primary care doctor referred me to an oncologist, and I went and met with her. I really like her, good bedside manner. She seems to know her stuff. But, I've been really kind of pushing everybody to use this medical management team, to reach out to the nurse concierge, to, do these things that we've been coaching them to do since we started working with you guys. And I'm going to go ahead and give them a call just to see, just to kind of give a second opinion kind of thing, just to give it another look." So great. I think you should do that. I think that's wise, first of all, but let me know how it goes. So she gets back with me a couple weeks later and says, "Well, so I talked to the medical management team and they looked into the oncologist, and she's got a quality score of 41 out of 100. So that is well below a failing grade for the audience. 41 out of 100, 2 open malpractice suits, a high readmission rate, a high infection rate, good bedside manner, nice woman, I'm sure, but just not a very good oncologist, clearly." And so she said, and going back to the HR director, the owner's wife, she says, they gave me a list of 6 other doctors that are 6 other oncologists that are all within a 10-mile radius of me, that have quality scores between 88 and 92 out of 100. And I said, "Okay, well, that's great." And she said, "I can pick any one of them, and I'm not going to have to pay a dime for any of this cancer treatment." And I said, "Yeah, that's how your plan is designed. That's absolutely correct." And she was just floored. She was just so amazed that this was, we were able to help her avoid going to a poor quality doctor while also eliminating her out-of-pocket expense for what could be a very kind of emotional, healthcare journey. Even though, again, it was stage 1, it's still breast cancer, right? So anyways, so that I didn't want to move on without at least highlighting that very important case study that came out of this group.
So I've got 19 keywords, and obviously we don't have time to cover 19 things. So I first of all love the correlation between the two lives, right? Like that is why you did your comic book, right? Is to kind of think about this whole thing. And I guess I'm going to say, for the employers that are out there, in order to achieve the result that hero in your story, the client, the trucking firm, and the owner and his wife, they had to take a different route. They had to break out of that comfort zone, like you said before, even when there was people throwing slime your way. And even though it was a harder road, individual health questionnaires, we've never done that before. What does this all mean? But like we have to start with those two things, right? You, Yoda, right? In my example, you teaching them, whether you call it a guide, a mentor, whatever it is, a sage. I mean, there has to be some level of you don't know what you don't know until you know it. And to use a Peter Parker, hey, the power and knowledge and all of those things with great power comes great responsibility. Well, knowledge is power. Right. Yeah. And I think that one of the things, and I posted this on LinkedIn earlier in the week, it frustrates me when advisors and employers, in the fear of not knowing something, just refuse to even go down the road. Whether you're an advisor and you're like, I'm hearing these strategies that are doing some amazing things. I don't do it today. I'm scared to go back to my employer and what if they think I'm stupid because I didn't know it yesterday? Well, the reality of it is none of us knew anything yesterday that we know today, that we learned today. But if we're not going to do this, how does the world change? How does any innovation do that? Elon Musk doesn't, produce Tesla and fly to the moon and Richard Branson and all the, innovation that happens in this world. So I first of all commend you for all of the different methods and mediums and putting yourself out there, but not for your personal glory. It's not your hero. You're trying to take other people on to come along that ride. But then we can look at it and say, we have to go back and say to that employer, high five, nice job. You got out of your comfort zone. A question that pops in, you and I know each other well. Let's throw some percentages out there. Out of 10 employers that you try to get on this journey, how many of them raise their hands and say, yeah, Chris, take me on this journey? Not that they hire you, that they're just the willingness to go down the journey. How many out of 10?
Gosh, yeah, that's a good question. I would say that
less than half, right?
Less than half. I was going to say 2 to 3.
I was going to say the same thing. So 2 to 3. I mean, 70 to 80% of the people sit on the rock. The rock is burning all around them because that's what health insurance is. Double-digit rate increases, 20% of our GDP, a top 3 expense for employers. Employees can't afford it. So the damn rock is burning. They're looking around. They see the smoke. They see the fire burning, and they're like, you know what? I'm just going to stay here because this is comfortable.
Yep.
Let me ask you another question. So how many times when somebody goes down that road and ends up in the promised land, eating in the field of tulips and everything, how many times out of 10 does it work for them?
Oh, 10 out of 10.
100% of that, right? So this is interesting.
Yeah.
Right? Because
I've never had anybody go back the other direction. I've never had anybody go back.
It is such an interesting thing that I wanted to leave the audience with is like the road less traveled is always hard, but the reality of it is it's always worth it. Name a thing. You want to be a better mother? That's harder than being a crappy mom. You want to be a good athlete? That's harder than being a not good athlete. You want to get good grades? You got to study more. Like I just hope that story and even your stats, 20 to 30% of the people are the only ones willing to go down the journey. The people that go down the journey have a better spot 100% of the time. And the people that are staying on the rock is burning.
Yeah.
The rock is burning. And so, if there's anything that people take from this, story and this conversation is get on the journey, start taking at least stages of the journey. Maybe you don't finish all of it in one book, but the reality of it is not even willing to go down is never going to get you to the tulip, filled fields, right? I mean, we're never going to get there.
Well, yeah, and you brought up an interesting point, and with that first comic book that I wrote I really had kind of three core messages. I didn't really talk a lot about health insurance or health care. There was kind of the three main takeaways that, in my mind, what they were supposed to be for the employers was, one, you need to smash your limiting beliefs, right? And that's, I think, a part of what we've been talking about here is smashing those limiting beliefs that you can't control healthcare costs, that there's nothing you can do differently, so on and so forth. The second piece was that you need to build an incentive-based plan that zeroes out employees' deductibles and copays. Now, a lot of times, especially in the early days, people would hear that and they would think, well, that sounds like that's going to be more expensive for me as an employer if you're telling me that I have no deductible, and so on and so forth, which again goes back to those limiting beliefs that you think that that's the only way to design a health plan is what Blue Cross or United Healthcare or Cigna tells you can do. And then the third thing, the final thing, the message ultimately was you have to take action. You have to do something, right? You've got to, anyways. And so I'll give your audience one preview. I'm in the process right now of writing volume 2. And in volume 2 is going to be a little bit more about the construction of and the management and how a self-funded plan works and how it's the same or in my opinion better than a fully insured plan, certainly. So we'll get a little bit more into that into volume 2. But yeah, ultimately it's ultimately, like, you don't need to overthink this. You don't need to become an expert in self-funding to become a self-funded health plan sponsor.
So let's wrap up here with, you have been an excellent guide, right? Your credentials speak for themselves. You've written a book, you've written your comic book, you are part of a documentary, you've gotten industry accolades, you're up for an award right now. But I also know you as somebody who cares more about the business and helping people than maybe your own glory. So I'm going to ask you two questions. There's advisors out there that are listening. What do you tell them? What does Chris Wolpert in his now 8-year journey, what does he tell a person that says, got it, man, I don't know, this world that I'm in right now, you might say the rock is burning, Morales. I think the rock is fine. What do you tell these people? What do you tell another advisor out there for the rising tide lifting all boats, that we're in this for a mission rather than our own personal glory or to make a couple bucks? What do you tell an advisor?
I would, there are two things. One is what I just mentioned with employers is you got to take action, right? You've got to do something a little bit differently than what you've done. Because look, I mean, as much as this is my passion, is building these types of plans, I still have kids to feed, right? So I've still got plenty of groups that are still fully insured, as much as it is what it is, right? But you have to take some forward action in a different direction if you want to get to a different destination. The other thing I would say, and what really benefited me, which I alluded to a little bit earlier, was you have to surround yourself with people that are doing this. So, yeah, it's one thing to be following people around on LinkedIn and stuff like that, but I think you need to spend time with Lester Morales. You need to spend time with Eric Silverman and Nelson Griswold and some of these other people that are out there that are have been beating this drum a lot longer than I have, because a lot of these people I just named and others I learned a ton from. And so if you change your network, I think there was was it Jim Rohn, or I don't know, somebody said that you're the sum of the 5 people that you spend your most amount of time with. And so outside of my family, the people that I'm spending my time with in a professional environment, I need those to be 5 people that are going to hold me accountable, that are going to help me raise my game, that are going to help me build the confidence that when the bet's to me and it's my chips on the table, that I can have the confidence to push them in and say, all right, let's go. Let's do this.
Awesome. I love that. Your network is your net worth, to quote a Jay-Z song, I believe. So let's end it with the heroes, right? The employers out there. What does Yoda, you, Chris Wolpert, the the guide, the sage. What do you tell a room full of employers that are listening right now? What do you tell them?
Yeah, well, I it may seem lazy, but I think it's kind of the same thing, right? I think first of all, you need to stop thinking that you can't do anything about this cost, because it's reached unsustainable levels. Whether you're a large organization or a small organization, it doesn't matter. When you look at what the out-of-pocket expenses are on average for an average plan today, it's somewhere north of $20,000. It's been that way for a few years, which you could get a small sedan for that, and that's what you're out of pocket, because, that's the out of pocket expense for a family of four anymore is north of 20 grand. I mean, that's insane. So I think that's part of it, is that you need to realize as employers that there is something that you can do about this, right? So let's just start with changing that mindset. We can worry about taking action when you find the right mentor, when you find the right guide to take you on that journey. And I think that's the other piece of what you need to do as an employer, is you need to look outside of, there's so many times I look at these MyEdge reports, and these companies have been with the same broker for 10 years. And you can also see how their spend has increased every year. And it's like, guys, this is black and white. Without even knowing anything else about you, I can see that you're spending more and more and more each year.
Am I
not doing anything different?
Going to the trainer when I gain weight every single year, right? I mean, that's the equivalent, right?
Exactly. So I think that's the other piece of it. Again, just the same advice I just gave brokers is you need to expand your network as it relates to people that can that can identify what the true sources of this problem are, and then bring in solutions that help do that. Because that, and again, I noticed this with the guy's agency I didn't end up buying, was he was pointing out a lot of problems, but it was basically he'd read the Wall Street Journal, and if they talked about healthcare or something like that, and then point out, oh, well, the problem is these hospitals, the problem is Congress, and it's like, well, shoot, that's not going to do anything. Like, you're my broker sitting in front of me, help me do something, right? And that's what I think you need to look for as an employer. And then again, just to my point I just made about the comic book, is that eventually you have to take action. You're going to face the ordeal without your mentor. You're going to have to be the one that faces this dragon and has to kill the dragon and bring home the treasure. So, best get started.
So there's people out there, Chris, that want to read your book, your comic book. They want to stay in touch with you. They want you as their guide. Where can somebody learn more about Chris Wolpert, follow you, get in touch with you? Where do people get a hold of you?
Well, as a sales guy, I don't try to hide myself online, so I'm not hard to find. But I would say first and foremost, probably LinkedIn. Obviously, very active on LinkedIn. And from there, you can go to our website, gbsbenefitsgroup.com. We've got both books that are available through there. And we've got some other videos and some other resources that are on the website as well that are at your disposal.
Awesome. Well, Chris, as somebody who is grown to be very fond of you, congratulations on all your success that you've had, that you continue to have. I will see you in Denver for hopefully watching you walk across the stage with your new broker advisor of the year. And thank you for shedding the light of encouragement of employers taking the journey to a better place, and that better place being lower cost for them, better benefits for their employees, lower cost for their employees, but they got to take that first move. So thanks for being that guide for employers making that first move.
You bet. Thanks, Lester. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, the audience out there. If you found this at all helpful, I read a Improving Your Podcast Book 101 the other day, and it said you got to just ask people to freaking share it. So I am asking you, if you heard this and you felt good about it, get people sharing it. So Chris, thanks so much for being on, man, and we'll see you soon.
You've been listening to Impact Healthcare, people and strategies that are disrupting the health benefits industry with Lester Morales. Remember, the journey to getting 20% savings on your healthcare benefits starts with total transparency. Remember to subscribe to the Impact Healthcare podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts.